Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot in the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. All right, everybody, I am here with Alaskan author, and I'm assuming born and raised Alaskan, Jessie Desmond, and we are here to talk about her new book on the topic of UFOs, Saucers of the North, A History of UFOs in Alaskan Airspace. I just finished this last night. I got a copy over the weekend and kind of buzzed through it. I had to read it pretty quick because I wanted to get done with it before this interview. But we're here with her, and we're going to talk about this book and UFOs in Alaska. Welcome to Alasquatch, Jessie.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I know it is kind of a thicker book. It's almost 300 pages. It's substantial.
Even though I had read the title of the book, it says A History of UFOs in Alaskan Airspace. When I got it and sat down with it and started to go through it, I was kind of surprised. Like, it goes back, it starts in the 1700s.
Yeah.
And there's, I'm obviously, UFOs are not my thing. I'm interested in the subject, but I don't really pursue it as much as I used to. It was kind of something I was really into when I was younger. But there's a lot of information in here because I consider myself, I'm not an expert, like I said, on UFOs, but I'm well versed in the subject of UFOs. But there was so much in here that I had no idea about or had never heard of. I was a little surprised. It looks like there's a ton of research that went into this.
Yeah, this book, I really started on it about just over a year ago. But I've been collecting stories and stuff like that for a long time. I was at one point the state director for MUFON up here, and then I got kind of busy. And you know how things go. It's a volunteer thing, so you cut out the volunteer stuff so you can focus on other things. So I didn't just start last year, but I started writing the book last year, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I often get contacted by people who, for some reason, equate, they think, well, this guy's into Bigfoot. He'll want to know about my UFO sighting. And I don't mind listening, but I often will say, like, well, hey, can you contact Jessie? She's the UFO person. So I try and refer people to you when I get UFO sightings. Yeah, let's talk about some of the early stuff in here, like the 1700s.
Okay.
A lot of that stuff that comes from native legends, native lore. Where did you dig up a lot of those stories?
Okay, so in the book, it starts out in the 1700s because that's when Russia occupied the Alaska area. And so I wanted to start there because that's basically where a lot of Alaska history starts, because before then we really didn't get a lot of written history. And I don't want to call it prehistory. It just wasn't really explored too
Right.
much. And then it goes into the Alaska Native stuff. And those just came from, I was like looking at Alaska Mythos books, and I came across a whole bunch of these stories, and I was like, man, that just doesn't sit right with me. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, here's a story of like these kids who they're out at night with a bow and arrow, and they're playing and whatever, and the moon comes down and they shoot arrows at the moon. And I was like, that's just weird, and there are other stories like that in here, because that moons don't come down. People don't get into a basket and go up to meet like a moon man or something.
Yeah.
But they do that in these native stories. So it just, maybe I was watching Ancient Aliens or something, and it's something just clicked, you know, with like ancient mythos. And these stories are just, most people don't know about them except for maybe Alaska natives.
Yeah. One of the ones, or there was two that were kind of similar that really stuck with me was uh, stories about people that were taken and they were in a place, and I think there was two different stories where they said they lifted up a rock and they could see like the ground below them, like they could see down below. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, man, what if you'd never seen like? Because it sounds kind of weird, like, well, they lifted up a rock and they could see down to the
Mhm.
ground, like the ground was below them. And I was like, well, if you've never seen like a porthole or like a trap door made out of metal, well, and,
Right.
maybe you just say, well, that's a rock. It's big and it's hard. It's a hard surface. It's a rock, but maybe it's like a metal covering or something like that. But those were like some, to me, seem like some really early accounts of like abduction.
Yeah, and like one of them, there's one called the Star Husband. Um, this this woman, like, she kind of gets taken, she gets put into this basket, and then there's a whooshing sound, and she's told not to look outside um, until they get to where they're going. And there's a whooshing, like a great rush of air, and then they're in this other place where she's going to meet this moon man or the star. You know, I think he's supposed to be a moon man or uh, son of the moon, or there's a term for it. I'm flipping through my own book to line up the details. Uh, yeah, and she ends up there's like food readily available. They're like, if you want something, just let us know, we'll get it for you. If you want clothes, let us know, we'll get it for you. Which seems, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and so my first thought was, does this do these people have like replicator? They can just replicate food or clothing or whatever. And then she meets like this starman or moon man or whatever, and they end up having a kid. And then she visits her village, and the villagers reject uh, this baby because they know it's some kind of hybrid, and they're like, that's not one of us. And she leaves and goes back with the moon man guy. And then there's associations of this moon character with with the eagle man. So sometimes you see like depictions of like a humanoid eagle man, and it's supposed to be similar to this moon man.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they get that name not because they look like a bird, but because they come from the sky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really detailed book with, I was surprised to see how far back it goes, and just how everybody that, lives in Alaska, the natives, the Russians, the white man, we all seem to be seeing things in the sky and interacting with things that come down from the sky. And it really makes Alaska seem like it's really a UFO hotspot, which I guess it is.
We
Yeah.
we are kind of a hot spot, but I think the majority of the sightings don't really get reported to Lamufon or New Fork or something. Just just because I feel like that's kind of the nature of Alaskans, to be a little leery of anyone who's collecting stories because they're not one of us. You know, it's like this whole
Yeah.
outsider mentality.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with Bigfoot stories. If you start if you go around and start talking to people about Bigfoot, everybody either has a story or knows someone that has a story, and it's the same way with UFOs. Or they'll say like,
Well,
"No, I've never seen a Bigfoot, but I've seen a UFO."
on Facebook, I created this page a couple years ago, and it's called Alaska UFOs. And I thought maybe I'd have, maybe up to like 50 or 80 or something people. And we're up in the thousands of people now. And it's just for Alaska residents pretty much, or people who regularly come up to Alaska. We kind of let in Canadians too. uh, and it's just about UFO sightings. And sometimes it is like on a daily basis. People are posting pictures and video and stuff. So it's things are going on, and they'll report them and they'll send stuff in on Facebook, but they won't do it for MUFON or New Fork. And I had
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Peter Davenport about that this summer too.
Yeah, I think there's probably some hesitation to come forward, and once something becomes like I don't want to say a corporation, but basically, it's an organization. I think people are a little untrustworthy of things like that. It's kind of I mean, look at the reputation that the BFRO has in the Bigfoot community. It went from like basically the only organization where you could report stuff to now people are like, a lot of people in the community just don't want to have anything to do with it. And I think probably it's this. I mean, I don't know for experience, but I think probably it's the same maybe in the UFO community. And a lot of these entities that have been around for a long time, like New Fork and MUFON, a lot of people kind of look at them as like, well, they're just it's a corporation now. It's not really a group, and they're here to collect information, and then it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays within the group, and they don't really do anything with it.
Okay, well, let me touch on that real quick. Okay, so MUFON has been around since 1969, and it was formed by a group of academics who realized that the Air Force was ending Project Blue Book, but there were still things that needed to be reported and investigated and stuff. And so they formed MUFON. And it's not a government organization. Uh, it's actually, there's some people who get paid, but they're all the real higher ups in there. And everyone else, state directors, field investigators, anyone like that, uh, that's all volunteer work. And so it's these volunteers, you go through a training thing, and you learn how to take reports and learn how to investigate and all that kind of stuff. It's really a good program if you want to get your toes wet in the field of ufology. I would highly recommend it just because they have a whole system, and all the data that they want you to collect is important data
Yeah.
that's needed for any investigator.
Do you think there's any government agents embedded in with those agencies?
Oh, sure. There's probably quite a few.
Yeah,
Um, I would
that
that
was
wouldn't
that was
surprise
kind of my
me at
point. It
all.
was I think there's some people who are untrustworthy or distrustful of those because they probably think that they've been around so long. They're probably crawling with government agents.
I'm sure there are a lot of them are. You have citizen scientists in there. You have pilots. You have academics in there as well. You have students. You have there's all kinds of people. But still, I mean that everyone is everyone is taught the same way on how to investigate all the UFO stuff. Um, and if you have questions, it's a good group to reach out to if you're a member, because then you can learn how to use equipment. You can ask questions, all that kind of thing. And so New Fork, which is the National UFO Reporting Center, is Washington based, like Washington State based,
Hmm.
and it's run by Peter Davenport. And I think he has one person working with him to help him out with his website. Um, it's kind of like his hobby. Um, he's not fast at getting stuff out, but he does go through everything, and he gets like hundreds and hundreds of phone calls and emails and stuff every day about all this stuff. It took me like a month or so just to get in touch with him, and I had to leave like a billion emails and phone calls and stuff.
Yeah, I believe he's got quite a bit on there. Quite a few sightings from Alaska and even from the Kenai Peninsula here. I think the last time I looked at the New Fork site, there was a quite a few from the Kenai Peninsula on there, which are the ones that because that's my geographical area I'm most interested in. Although I think a lot of them, especially anything. I mean, and this is my opinion. A lot of times, anything that's kind of described as a fireball or something that comes down, I'm thinking like that's a flare. Because I mean, we're right here on Kachemak Bay. There's a lot of vessels that are always sending up flares and stuff. A lot of Coast Guard training goes on here, and I remember when I was working at the police department, we'd always get notifications like, "Hey, tomorrow night they're going to shoot off a bunch of flares for whatever training or whatever they're having." And I think that and there's not really a lot of documentation that goes into that as far as like when we get those notifications. So if somebody was to report like, "Oh, I saw this, coming out of the sky," and it didn't say, there was like a delay in reporting where it didn't get reported, for maybe a few weeks or months after the fact. Then you call like the local police department or something. Hey, was there any training or something going on there? Well, there wouldn't have been really any documentation of that. There might have been a note or an email or something passed around that said, "Hey, there's going to be some flares in the bay tomorrow" or something, but it wouldn't be like something where you could go back into the reporting system and look and say like, "Oh yeah, there was some training going on there." So I don't know. That's my opinion on a lot of the fireballs that get seen, especially around Kachemak Bay. And although I did see some really cool stuff when Readout blew, and was it 2009?
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of like lightning and like different color flashes in the sky that I'd never seen a volcano erupt before. And that was pretty interesting to just see what all that can do. I never really thought about it. I thought, okay, the volcano is going to blow. There's going to be lava come out of it, and that's going to be it. But actually, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that, like a lot of aerial phenomenon with the different colors and lightning and flashes in the sky.
Yeah, I'm in Fairbanks, and we don't really have a volcano and visual insight, so I can't really watch that. But that'd be really cool to watch. I mean, I've seen volcanoes that have spewed some lava, and there's lava coming down, like in Hawaii, but they're not. It's not like blowing stuff out at that point.
So I noticed the ones that really captivated me were there were like a few sightings in the book where that kind of they didn't go into detail, but they alluded to abduction, and a lot of them would say something like, "Well, there was a flash of light, and then it was like 4 hours later." Or the person, the trip took, it was supposed to take an hour and it took 4 hours or something like that. And do you think that there's a lot of abductions like that don't get necessarily, I don't want to say reported, but the people just don't remember them. And, they think, well, there was a, oh, I must have zoned out and now it's, 2 hours later than I thought it was. I mean, everybody kind of has those little moments where you lose a little time here and there. But
Uh,
the Go
okay,
ahead.
so when I was in MUFON, there were there were a couple of abduction things that came through, which I'm not at liberty to repeat. I mean, I can probably briefly mention them, but I wasn't comfortable putting them in the book because they wanted to remain anonymous and all that kind of stuff. And there's one case where this person had like he found he found like a metal piece in him, like an implant. The problem is, I think it was John Lear. Dr. John Lear, uh, was the one who was removing and studying the implants, but he passed away a couple years ago. So now I don't really know who's studying implants. So that was a tough one because I didn't know who to refer this person to.
Yeah,
But it's possible. I think it's very possible that there might be a lot of abductions out there that just don't get reported because they'll go, "Hey, people are going to think I'm crazy or something if I mention this." And I think that's probably what's keeping us from hearing a lot of abduction stories.
yeah. There's definitely kind of a stigma that goes along with that. I remember uh, when Communion first came out. I remember seeing the book cover and just like I, I gotta admit, I was one of those kids. I was scared of ET. The movie. I didn't like ET at all. And when Communion came out, and I kind of became aware of it, I was that's like one of my things that I'm scared of is the aliens, like the gray aliens, especially like, and something coming into your house that you can't really do anything about. That's like I'm surprised there's not more abduction themed horror movies. Um, it just seems like it's something that's really really scary, that something can do that and just have that kind of control over you, and there's not really anything you can do about it. And
I
you know,
think it's hard to get that across in a film, like
yeah,
because there's a lot of feeling or something. And I think it's more of like a mental and emotional thing. It's because like Fire in the Sky, they had you know the scene where he's being taken out of it, he's being abducted and all that kind of stuff. And it, I know a lot of people are all about it, but I was just like it didn't scare me like I guess other people like it scared other people.
yeah.
You know
I
what I
thought
mean?
Fire in the Sky was pretty scary. Have you met Travis?
I have not met Travis. No,
I met him.
I've heard him on Coast to Coast.
Yeah, I met him a few years ago, and there's just, I mean, he's a big guy. He's bigger than I am,
Really?
and well, taller. He's taller than I am, and he he was just, I just spoke with him briefly, just kind of like shook his hand. Hey, how you doing? And I just thought when I met him, I was like, man, there's something just kind of off about him, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. And I heard, I think it was Mark Matsky from Small Town Monsters from
Mhm.
Sasquatch, and he was talking about meeting him. I think he met him actually at the same event that I met him at, and he described him. He said there's something very haunted about him. Like he just seems like a haunted person, and I think that like that hit the nail on the head. Like that's exactly that's how I would have described it if I had had the words. And yeah, he just seems like he's kind of got that 1,000 yard stare. There's something about him that just seems like he's not always there with you when he's around, and
I've heard that from a
yeah,
bunch of people actually.
yeah,
So
and yeah,
I
he's
have met Whitley Strieber, excuse me, who did write Communion. I met him at UFO Fest this spring,
mhm.
and he kind of has a little bit of that too. But I think he's talked more about it and been a little more open about it. So it's not probably not as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Travis is he's an interesting guy, and I met him at a Bigfoot conference, and when he got there, I was like, man, I think it would be so cool to have a signed copy of Fire in the Sky, and I was like, I'm gonna swing by and get one. And he's like, well, this is a Bigfoot event, so nobody's gonna care about UFOs. So he brought like 20 books, and he sold out of them in like the first hour. And so I didn't get one, but I did get to meet him and kind of say hey to him. But yeah, I was pretty disappointed I didn't get a signed book from him.
that would have been really cool. I
Yeah.
uh, I was supposed to get. I took my copy of Communion with me to UFO Fest, and I Willie Strieber was not signing books because he was kind of afraid of getting COVID, and he's about to go on vacation. So I missed out on that too.
Yeah. Well, he's got to be getting up there too. He's in his
Yeah,
probably 70s, 80s, maybe older. Yeah.
something. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, so we talk. There's a lot of history in the book. Obviously, well, you're a history buff, right?
I have a degree in history. I have
Yeah,
a
and
bachelor's degree in history.
it's kind of evident reading through the book. There's a lot of history, a lot of history of the I guess the military industrial complex up here in Alaska. Of course, we're a strategic geographic location when it comes to military stuff. So we've got a lot of bases, a lot of testing facilities up here for cold weather gear, stuff like that. I was a part of that myself for a while. I've been out in Fort Greely when it was like 60 below. Not fun. Do not recommend. But I had a question for you. What do you think? So, strategy aside, geographic, because we're close to Russia and all that, the Cold War, uh, take that out of the picture. What do you think came first? The military? Do you think the military put so many bases and stuff like that up here because do you think there was any consideration at all for the UFO activity up here, or do you think it's all completely strategy based for human elements?
I think it started out as just being a strategical location, during World War II, because Alaska was invaded. Most people don't seem to realize that, but some of our islands got invaded by the Japanese, which I mentioned in the book. And so there's strategic locations set up for that, and then I think because we had people flying in the air and people on ships and stuff like that, um, who are looking for some sort of enemy. They realize that, oh, there's other things in this area too, because real quick, we got UFO stuff going on up here. Um, Wendell Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, is that right? Uh, let me find my note in my book here. He was stationed up here in, I want to say, the late 40s. Sorry, I remember like the general dates, but I don't always remember the exact dates. Um, anyway, so he was stationed up here for a little while out of Elmendorf, which is that's now J-Bear out of Anchorage, and he was in charge of like installing surveillance equipment in the aircraft, and like photographic and video surveillance equipment. And then they would send out the planes and they would return, and he would take all that footage and kind of go through it. And if there's anything of importance, he would clip it and send it out to Wright Patterson, right? So apparently he saw a lot of UFOs coming through on the stuff that he was sending out to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Um, and that, I think that really started a lot of the UFO stuff up here.
Yeah, and
So
Wright Patterson, that is in Ohio, correct?
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah, and
believe
that's
that's
like a
also
really major base in case anyone doesn't know that.
yeah, I believe it's connected to the Roswell crash. It's one of
Yeah,
the suspected locations where they took the either the
that's where
bodies or the
they
saucers.
supposedly sent the bodies. Yeah,
Yeah, and I believe there's is it Hangar 18 or something? I think there's a is kind of famous. A famous location for where that stuff might be. I think there's even like a Megadeth song about it or something. Um, yeah.
that's that's right. Yeah, I think it's AR 18, and it really got mentioned in The Day After Roswell, which was a book that came out in the later 90s. Um, I read that when it came out, and that was kind of a big game changer for me. That really opened my eyes for Roswell.
Yeah, and you know, bringing it back to Alaska, with all the military presence up here, I'm just surprised we don't have more crash stories. I think up here, it seems like that the UFOs up here seem to be really good at evading our defenses, and it's kind of scary when you think about it. If they're not some kind of natural phenomenon like earth lights or earthquake lights or something like that, if they are some kind of craft, it's pretty crazy that all of us in the military with the technology and the just like that's your job is to keep things from coming here that we don't want here, and they can just seem to come in and leave at will. And again, I keep going back to movies. I'm like, I'm surprised there's not more like horror movies, like UFO horror movies about it, because when you think about it, it is pretty scary that things can just come and go at will and into people's homes, out of people's homes, stuff like that. Do you think that the UFOs? Do you think they're attracted to stuff like that, like military machines and movement, just to kind of see like, well, let's see what they got. Let's see what they can do.
Well, one thing that I was thinking of is Alaska is a majorly huge area. Like people people down the states don't really get it. We have so much space up here, and there's only a pocket of areas, like just a little bit of space to set aside for like people. You know, otherwise it's all tundra and trees and glaciers and mountains and stuff. You know, and so I think Alaska might be kind of seen as like a safe spot. Like there's not a huge amount of people up here. They can land the UFOs if they need to, which Wendell Stevens, uh, in some of his photographic and video stuff that he was collecting, he had mentioned the UFOs landing on glaciers and stuff. So uh, I don't know, maybe it's like just a safe spot because we don't have a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's
And one interesting aspect about the book that I found was how you can track, and it's mentioned in the book, how you can track the differences in the kind of craft seen. It kind of starts off with saucers and then evolves into the triangles. And do you think that is a do you think that's maybe just a different species of alien that's coming here, or do you think their technology has evolved from saucers to triangles? Because initially, like my theory was that the triangles are ours, that they're something that we built, some kind of stealth or secret aircraft. But there's a lot of weird sightings attributed with the triangles too, like with the flashes and the missing time and stuff like that. So that makes me think maybe it's not ours, something that we made. What's your opinion on that?
okay. So for the triangles, there we have two types of triangles. We have two types of triangles. It's mentioned. Oh gosh, which chapter? It's like the 1980s chapter. Uh, this is how my brain works. Chapter 5. And so you have the classic TR3B triangle, which is like a equilateral triangle, and underneath there's a light at each corner and then one in the center. Right? That's a pretty typical triangle. There's even some photos and stuff uh, of that kind of thing in the book. I think those are our military craft. But there's also this really weird, elongated, like huge, elongated, solid black triangle. And I've seen it multiple times up here myself growing up. And it just, there's no lights on it. And it just moved real slow. Like it was just taking its time. It's king of the air, whatever. Uh, and I only saw it because it moved. It was like kind of cloudy, but there was a full moon and you could see some stars and stuff. And it moved past a section of cloud. And I realized that there was something there. And then I could kind of notice it, you know. Uh, and my first thought was that looks like a completely black Star Destroyer from Star Wars. Like it's that kind of elongated shape. So I don't know what that is. I don't know whose craft that is, but I'm not the only one who's seen it. Um, there's actually quite a few people who've seen that one.
Yeah, I read a really interesting theory on, I think it was Reddit or something. So I mean, take that take that for what it's worth. Um, a gentleman was saying that and it doesn't explain a lot of the historical sightings either, like pre World War II. But he made the comment how he thinks that a lot of UFO sightings are uh, they're actually Japanese, because of how their technology seemed like they seemed to be on fire as far as like their technology. It was advancing by leaps and bounds. You know, they have the what is it, the magnetic train or whatever, the mag train or whatever they have up there,
Mm-hmm.
and it just kind of seemed to stop with that and not really go any further. It didn't progress, and he thinks that they took that technology and started developing it in secret, and they're not, because of the treaties from World War II, they're not allowed to have a standing army. So they kind of took that technology and started building in secret, basically spaceships, or like really, at least really technologically advanced flying machines. And I never really thought about that. And again, like I said, it doesn't explain the historical sightings from like pre World War II. But I thought it was an interesting take nonetheless. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it was something I hadn't heard before.
Uh, well, okay. I have something that kind of ties into that. I don't know if I don't. I have never heard of any theory like that actually, where they could be Japanese. Uh, but I'm sure you've heard of Foo Fighters,
Oh yeah,
and we've had a number of Foo Fighter sightings up here in Alaska. Of course, right around World War II. Um, and so I thought that was really interesting. Those were noted. I want to say in Project Blue Book. I might have pulled some of those from. There's this there's this website. It's Project 1947, and I think they had a couple of those listed as well. So kind of a mixture. Um, but I mean, it's all backed up with military documents, like Project Blue Book, obviously, Project Grudge, Project Sign. That's all government stuff. And then Project 1947 is a website if you want to look that up. And they have just massive amounts of government documents that they've been gathering.
yeah. Well, a lot of people don't realize. We touched on it a little bit before about how involved Alaska was with the Second World War, and there was actually some ground fighting that went on here. The first ship, the boat that we took to Port Chatham, the Puckuk, they actually do in the summers. They do like a World War II Aleutian Islands tour where they take people around, like people that are interested in history. They take them around to the Aleutian Islands and show them where the battles were fought and all that. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then the first place that I worked as law enforcement on St. Paul Island during World War II, the natives from St. Paul were actually rounded up and taken off the island and placed, in camps because they were afraid that the Japanese were going to invade the Pribilof Islands. So Alaska actually has a pretty interesting history when it comes to World War II that a lot of people aren't aware of. Even people that are like World War II history buffs really don't seem to realize how much Alaska was involved in World War II.
Actually, I know that I have a history background, but my World War II's knowledge is mainly European based. I'm not really totally familiar with a lot of the Pacific side of things for that, except for Alaska history, Alaska World War II history.
Yeah, well, same here. And there seems to be. I mean, my knowledge of World War II is pretty much movies, Band of Brothers, stuff like that. But I think I might even have the Pacific on DVD, and I've never sat down and watched it. It's like the sequel to Band of Brothers that covers the war in the Pacific, and I've never really sat down and watched it. And there's a really cool story about how I can't remember the name of it, but it's that place where the Japanese did all those weird experiments and stuff, and they were like tortured
Mhm.
people. There's a name for it. I can't remember what it is.
It was like its own
Apparently,
island, right?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
apparently, George Bush, the first George, I think it was H.W. Bush. Was he the first one? The first Bush, the elder
Okay.
Bush. Apparently, he was like this close, and I'm using my teeny fingers. He was this close to getting captured near that island. Like he got shot down near there, and they were after him. Like the Japanese that were patrolling the area were after him, and he got rescued before he got picked up. So he almost ended up in that laboratory.
I wouldn't want to be in that laboratory.
But
Well, it's a good thing that he, I guess, didn't get taken there. Um, let's see here. Okay, so one thing I really want to touch on is that what happened with World War II in Alaska, because they were like, hey, we need Alaska to be a state, we need it uh, as a strategic location. They set up all these radar systems, right? And it started right after World War II. So we had like the Dew Line, we had the White Alice Communications System, uh, which is WAX. We have BMUS, which is Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. We have the ACNW, which is, oh gosh, I think it's like aircraft. It's just an early warning system. It's another early warning system. We have we have like a bunch of these things. And we actually had one on a hill on Murphy Dome, which is right outside of Fairbanks here. And we still have one radome, which is like, it looks like a golf ball on
Hmm.
top of a building. And so we have one of those still out there, which is gated. So don't break in because it's Air Force owned. And because we had all these radar systems set up, what I found, I was able to track down all this information on something called Project Pinball, which took place in the 50s. And the Air Force used the radar systems to track not only foreign aircraft, but UFOs over Alaskan airspace. And because I started finding all this information and stuff, and I had to ask a lot of people for assistance. And I get FOIA requests, and it took so long to wade through all that information. Um, like the 1950s is its own chapter in this book, just because there's so much that goes into it. That was a really big year for UFOs in Alaska. Not to mention, the very first feature film that involved UFOs was filmed in Alaska and took place in Alaska because the guy who wrote it and directed and acted in it, Mikhail Conrad, he had been up here in like 1948 to film something called Arctic Manhunt, when he said that he witnessed uh, UFOs in Alaska. And so then he wanted to make a movie about it. So it's kind of a spy film, but also UFOs.
Yeah, I believe there's a picture of the movie poster in the book,
There is,
and
yep.
yeah, there's a ton of pictures in the book. There's a lot
I
of
wish I had more.
newspaper articles. There's pictures of UFOs. There's some cool pictures of lights in the sky. There's a really cool picture of a triangle. Um, there, I mean, it's a really comprehensive book. There's a lot of stuff in here. Um, I think personally, my favorite story out of the whole thing is the one about the mass casualty event with the animals and finding the animals in the circle. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That was something I was holding on to because I found it in this old UFO magazine um, from like the late 70s. And let me pull it up so it's like right in front of me in this thing. Okay. So this it was out of the December 1978 issue of Ideals UFO magazine. The author was John Love, and he actually made a trip up to Alaska to collect stories to see what he could find. Um, so on his way up, he ran into uh, a National Park Service ranger aboard a ferry, and they had they had seen some UFOs and stuff, and like UFOs dipping down into the water, and we have a lot of UFO sightings from ferries and cruises. So, if you ever want to see something, you have a pretty good chance from a ferry or an Alaskan cruise. Anyway, so there were a group of five uh, grad students. I think they're all from like Columbia or most of them are from Columbia or something, University in New York. So they were up hiking around, kind of out in the boonies for like about a month, and they were outside of Eagle, which is kind of near the Alaska Canadian border. And one of them woke up one morning. They were kind of camped out on a ridge, looked out, and there was multiple UFOs in the sky. And he saw one rising up from like the valley below. Uh, and he woke up the others, said, "Hey, we can hike down there and see what's up," right? And so they walked down to this site, uh, and there was like a circular area where the natural grasses and stuff were all kind of swirled and pressed down. There were with like four triangular leg sites, I guess. Like if you imagine like a disc with legs coming out of it. Um, and then there were a number of different carcasses and stuff in the area. So there was like a little bit of that angel hair filament that they found, and I think the majority of the angel hair filament stories comes out of like Washington and Idaho. So I really don't hear about it too much up here. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, there was a grizzly bear carcass, and I think that was missing its paws and its I don't
It's
know,
eyes or teeth. I don't remember. Yeah, something
I
like
think it
that.
was maybe the eyes and the paws were missing.
Yeah.
There was a grizzly and a grizzly cub, right? So there's two of them, and then there was bodies of caribou and elk. I think there was some moose as well, and then there was a juvenile whale carcass, which is the weirdest out of all of those. Um, we don't really have elk up here, so I mean we have some deer. We have like some Sitka deer or something, but uh, that's only located uh, on Sitka or at Sitka. And then we don't really have elk because when you think elk, you think of like these big, you know, father of Bambi kind of elk, right?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they. Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Oh, here we go. The elk had no internal organs, and then the whale was a killer whale. It was 15 feet long or so, and it if you look at a map of Alaska, Eagle, and you just draw a straight line from the ocean to Eagle, it's like 400 miles. So, I mean, because it's inland, and so there's no way a whale's gonna just magically go up there. Uh, and it's interesting because like the park ranger had seen these UFOs like scoop stuff up from from the water. I just think that's pretty interesting. So I don't know. They found like some weird rocks that ended up getting confiscated uh, when they were trying to fly back. They kind of opened up their luggage and these weird rocks were gone. So one of the students was a geology grad student, so he was going to study the rocks at Columbia, which is mentioned all in the book. So
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. I just that's a head scratcher right there. Like if that's true, that's amazing because well, I mean, you've got a whale, 400 miles from the ocean in the
yeah,
middle of the woods.
I really feel like I don't want to give it all away, but
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting whether you read it for again after hearing me talk about it or you read it beforehand.
Yeah. And I'll say there's a diagram in the book of the scene that's really cool.
Yeah, that's
It's
directly out of the
yeah,
magazine.
yeah. So yeah, that's almost worth the price of the book alone is hearing about that story. That's pretty cool.
Well, actually, what I think is kind of an interesting story is this Men in Black story that happened. Sorry, I have it right here. In 2018 in Anchorage.
Yeah.
So
I remember when that first, or maybe it was you that was telling me about it, and I kind of look. I'm pretty skeptical about that one, just
I
because I don't
I'm
know.
not really
I
sure.
watched. What's that?
So I'm not really sure what to think about it, but
Yeah.
uh, I mention it anyway because all I'm doing with this book is presenting information.
Right.
I'm I'm not making deductions. I'm not, you know, yeah, here is a lot of UFO stories and sightings and stuff, so people can be the judge for themselves. But that one
I
was
remember
pretty significant.
the one of the, and this is a silly, one of the main reasons I'm skeptical is because because you can go and watch the video online, and there's stills from the video in the book. And I was looking at the office where this man in black supposedly came in, and I'm looking at the office, and I'm like, that doesn't look like any office I've ever seen in Alaska, because there's no like Alaskana art on the wall or anything. So I was just like, I don't think that's Alaska. But I don't know. It's a fascinating story though, and it's an interesting video. But I don't know. I don't know
There
what to
was a,
think about it.
did you watch the follow up video?
Yes,
Because
yes, and
there's actually two videos. The the security guard who ended up getting fired because he sent this footage in, uh, he sent it into this YouTube channel called Apex TV, and Apex TV kind of went through it, step by step, and analyzed it and stuff. And then so you have like that part of the footage, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, um, they actually got in touch with the lady in the video who went with this weird man in black, uh, and they had like an hour-long interview with her. So she ended up having like some weird medical stuff after this man in black and his partner gave her a shot. Oh, hang on, dog door. I told you.
yeah, I'm surprised my dogs haven't thrown a fit yet. They must be taking a nap or something. But yeah, I there's so much UFO stuff to going on in Alaska. I was kind of taken aback by how much information is in the book. I mean, there is a lot of stuff in here, and this isn't all of it. Like you were saying, like a lot of stuff doesn't get reported. It doesn't get you know posted on the internet. It doesn't get, people just don't talk about it, and it's kind of, there's a lot of stuff in here. It's almost overwhelming. There's a recent cattle mutilation up in Delta Junction that gets
Yeah,
talked
that
about.
I actually postponed the publishing of this book because that happened right as I was like, "Hey, I'm done with this book." Yeah, and then uh, this cow mutilation happened, and I only have pictures of the third one, and apparently the week before, there had been two cows that had also been mutilated, and after publishing this book, um, there's been incidents of strange moose carcasses, and I don't know if it's a natural thing or if it's hunters or poachers or whatever, but like you'll have like a moose without a head just laying in the woods, or there was a moose head with the spinal column attached, like a fully meaty, fur on moose head with a spinal column hanging out with no body. And then that was right next to like a completely down to the skeleton uh, moose torso, and it's just like, what is going on? Like that moose head that kind of reminded me of like a predator, like ripping out the, you know what I mean? And I was just like, oh my god. Uh, so it's just interesting. There are some other animal mutilation stories in the book, mostly involving uh, caribou herds that have mysteriously died. And I did talk to Linda Moulton Howe about that, and she's like, "Oh yeah, she's pretty sure that there's more stuff going on up here than people realize."
Yeah. Well, I think that's true for UFOs, Bigfoot, and just about anything else like that. There's so much, like you were saying earlier, there's so much space up here where there's just no people, that this is the perfect place to come up to if you're looking for a place to lay low. If you have the means of propulsion to get anywhere on the planet pretty quick, this is a good place to come for some privacy.
Uh, I do want to give a quick shout out to Shane Land, who is a he just finished writing a book. Let's see here. I have it somewhere around here. Um, it's not right behind me. I think it's Bigfoot Unclassified
I
or
think so. I've
Unclassified.
I've got it somewhere around here,
Yeah,
but I don't.
I have it.
Yeah,
I think it's on a different bookshelf. Um, and so I know he's a Bigfoot guy, but he has a history of being in the military and military intelligence and stuff. And so he really wanted me to publish this book. Um, so he kind of gave me a little bit of a push. So I want to say thanks to him,
yeah,
and maybe we can work on more projects because this was supposed to be a precursor to a future project. So we'll see if that happens.
yeah.
Um,
I'm gonna have to have Shane on. I haven't talked to him in a while. I know every once in a while I'll hear from him, and I'll be like, oh man, we need to get together and go squatching, and life gets in the way. Things never happen, but it's yeah, he's a cool guy. So I
I know, oh, go ahead.
I think this book it's pretty conclusive, and I mean it goes from the 1700s to the current day. I mean it's, as far as I know, it's the most Alaska based sightings and activity, in one place. I would say it's probably right now, as of right now, the definitive history of UFOs in Alaska. So anybody that's
I
interested
believe
in,
it is.
what's that?
So I believe it is because
Yeah,
I was looking. I was looking to see what else was out there, and uh, you can find books on HARP. You can find you can find a couple books on the JAL 1628 incident, which happened November 17th, 1986, which is now Alaska UFO Day, November 17th. uh, and I think that's probably about it. Like I think we get some mentions in a few random books for stuff, but yeah, as far as I know, that this is like the new player for Alaska UFO books.
yeah. So anybody that's interested in Alaska or UFOs or both, I mean, you got to have it. So
And I
where can
get
people
it
pick it up?
over. Oh, they can find it on Amazon. That's sorry, guys. I self-publish. I know some people refuse to buy from Amazon, but that's where you're going to find it. Um, unless you find me, unless I do a convention and I do or a book signing or something, and I have never done one of those before, where I'm
Yeah.
signing books. But this is actually my sixth book. It's my thickest book, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing next. I have like this one book project that I've been continually working on and revamping, and I get so far that I'm like, no, let me scrap this and start over again. And it's that one's on this guy named Count Saint Germain. Uh, I'm kind of like a leading researcher on the guy just because I've been at it for so long. Uh, and so writing that kind of book would be like an opus piece, you know what I mean? So I get to a point where I'm like, oh no, this isn't any good. I don't know if I want to write it this way. Uh, I don't know. Maybe I need some assistance on that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's
I
kind
would
of how I
take
felt about my
this.
Port Chatham book. Is it wasn't so much released as it escaped.
Well, the Saint Germain one just hasn't escaped yet. You know, uh, I just need to sit down and do it. I guess. But if anyone doesn't know who that is, Count Saint Germain is said to have been immortal or said to be immortal. Um, and let's see here. He's a real person. He was a French diplomat. Uh, Kind of came onto the scene in. I tracked him back to about 1690s, 1680, late 1680s, something like that. And then like I have him tracked through the 1800s. Um, and I think the most recent sightings, where there's like a group of sightings, is in the 60s, the 1960s. And he's always like the same age. Um, he almost stopped the 7 Years' War like 3 years early, but the French war marshal would have lost a lot of money, so that didn't happen. Thus, it's called the 7 Years' War because it lasted 7 years.
So he's kind of like he's like a Highlander. He just keeps popping up all over the place, and he's always the same age.
He he goes away for a little while, then he comes back, and yeah, um, and he's super fascinating because he has so many different facets. And like he was a rival musically to Handel, and which I mean that's kind of crazy. Um, he was like an alchemist and a chemist. I guess alchemy is kind of a pre-chemistry, is how I imagine it. Like it's a precursor to chemistry or modern chemistry. Uh, he was designing steam engines before steam engines were really a thing. Uh, he he knew all the nobility and royalty and stuff of Europe in the 18th century. So he was
Yeah,
just all over the place. Yeah, yeah.
maybe
I know it's not the
maybe
topic of this, but I can always talk about that too.
maybe it's
But
like what did they say in Men in Black? He didn't die; he just went home. Maybe he was an alien.
I because I grew up on a steady diet of vampire novels, like Anne Rice stuff. I like to imagine that maybe he was a vampire, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, talking about being able to get your book in conventions, let's talk about the Boreal Bigfoot Expo just real quick. I think we've got some dates nailed down and a venue.
Yeah, okay. So the Boreal Bigfoot Expo. This will be the second one. It's going to occur on June. Hold on, I don't have my calendar right in front of me. Let me just click through on my computer. It is June 17th and 18th in 2023. Uh, so it's a 2-day event up here in Fairbanks, and it'll be held at the Carlson Center. Um, we we really haven't nailed down our guest speakers yet, so I can't
Right.
promise anything in the way
Yeah.
of guest speakers. Though I think you wanted to be a guest speaker, right?
Yes, I believe I'm going to be there. Possibly Rob Roy. At least he'll be there. Hopefully selling his wares, if not speaking, maybe on Area A. Um, we'll have some cool stuff lined up.
And I think Stephen Majors wants to come back up. He's with, was it Extreme
Extreme
Northwest
expeditions. Yeah.
Expedition?
Yeah. But yeah, save the dates June 18th, 17th through 18th. So
Yep.
just get that out there and let people know that's a date they need to keep in mind, and they can show up there and they can meet both of us, get copies of everybody's book,
No,
hopefully.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to sign stuff because I'm going to be running the convention.
Yeah.
I'm one of the committee
Yeah.
members, so it's kind of hard to get stuff signed when
Yeah.
you're trying to make sure that everything is running smoothly. Um, I know that we're going to have a lot of displays this next year, so we've really amped up our goals on increasing displays and making it a little more visually impressive. We are hoping to have some films maybe to show, uh, documentaries or whatever on, or it doesn't even have to be a documentary. It could be like a student film about like a Bigfoot trying to break into a cabin in a horror movie style or something. Like we're open to a lot of different possibilities. um, we think it'd be really cool if there was some sort of film aspect to it. I know UAF has a film department now. So maybe we'll get someone on board with that. Who knows? Uh, what else? I don't know. I think we're hoping for like some piggyback events. So if any local people want to have something at their locations, we'll mention their thing as long as they mention our thing, and piggyback event.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I'm excited for it. I can't wait. It's I don't have any plans as far as next year goes, except for that. Really, that's the only convention slash expo that I really have plans to attend so far. But I'm excited about it.
Well, I recently saw Adam Davies down at a Utah convention called Phenomicon, um, and he wants to come back up because he was up for the first one, which was a big surprise to all of us, and he wants to come back up and be a guest speaker. So
Awesome.
maybe we'll
Yeah.
have him. It's not 100% sure yet, so don't go spreading that around, but not yet. But maybe Adam
Yeah.
Davies will show up.
Yeah. I want to maybe combine it with an expedition next year, like come up well, kind of like we did with the first year, where we went up to the North Slope with Adam and Steven. And I kind of want to do the same thing maybe next year, where I come up, do the expo, and then maybe head out and do an expedition. I really want to get out to the um, Manly Hot Springs area. I hear there's a lot Bigfoot wise going on up there, so I kind of want to go up there and spend a couple of days and look around.
Uh, yeah, I mean, the interior, we have like this huge boreal forest, which is why it's called the Boreal Bigfoot Expo. Um, and I think it's just a really great place for Bigfoot. I mean, we have a lot of bear up here, and according to Jeff Meldrum, for every 100, black bear, or I wonder if that goes into grizzlies as well. But for every 100 black bears, you have possibly one Sasquatch, and that's just like his estimate. It's not 100%. And so, I mean, like Alaska, we have a ton of bear up here. We have various species. We have a lot of empty space. We have a lot of food that they could be foraging and eating, and we have small animals and larger animals, and we have places that they could live and make homes and stuff. So I think the interior of Alaska is really a great spot for them. Especially, I mean, in the hills here, we just have so much stuff. We have so much stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like we said a couple of times today, Alaska's so big that unless you've really been here and seen a good portion of it, it's kind of hard to grasp how big it is. And I'm convinced there are sections in this state where no human being has ever set foot. Maybe I mean, sure, they've probably flown over it, but as far as getting down on the ground and walking around in it, I'm sure there's lots of areas that probably haven't seen a person, and a person hasn't seen
But
it.
I think they're still trying to map the state, like in detail. I I don't think they have finished that since we've become a state.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, it just I drove from Anchorage to Homer yesterday, and just coming through, the pass and stuff. If you look off to the side of the road and just see how just rugged the terrain is, and how much just how thick the foliage is, it's just, man, it's pretty daunting. Like, if you're like, oh, I'd like to walk up to the top of that hill and get a good view, and just to look and see how much effort that would take, and how big, how daunting it is. It's amazing. Like, and there's places like that all over the state, which is just huge. And there could be anything in those thickets and those pockets where it's just almost impossible to get to. But
yeah, I always, I thought a good spot would be like the White Mountains, which is just north of Fairbanks, because it's the same sort of thing. There are trails, But outside of those trails, I don't think there's been a lot of people out that way. It's all just
Yeah.
natural resources land, like State of Alaska Department of Natural Resources. I think the good ones are.
Yeah, people are creatures of habit. There's not a ton of trail breaking going on anymore. You know, a lot of people stick to the trails, and you know, occasionally a hunter will go out and you know go to a new place or something like that. But for the most part, you know, especially with hunting, people less and less people are hunting every year, and you've got less people going out into the woods. And the ones that do go out, they have their they have their places they go, and they don't really go anywhere else, and they don't do a lot of trail breaking. So yeah, it's not as far fetched as people think it is. That there's something out there that we haven't really caught up with.
I actually okay. So one of our committee members, because I this year I kind of made Larry get onto our committee because I wanted his opinion on stuff. But one of our committee members, Michael Thompson, he's out of Toke, and I found that there's a lot of stories coming out of Toke, and I was kind of surprised by that. Um, I ventured down that way, and in Toke, and like if you follow the Alaska Highway, you'll hit Tana Cross, and if you go south towards Gakona, um, where Harp is, that's a Toke cutoff highway. Like there's a lot of stories out that way, and I was just very surprised by that. And people are just like, "Oh yeah, I've seen them cross the road," and apparently there's a lot of Bigfoot that hang out in Wrangell St. Elias National Park. Again, like that's not a heavily ventured into national park. It's not like Denali where they have tour buses.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Most people,
I
I think, have gone to the south end of St. Elias National Park.
I don't think there's a ton of personally, my opinion. I don't think there's a ton of Bigfoot in or around Denali. I think there because Denali's a lot. There's a lot of open space around Denali, not a lot of you know thick tree cover. I think that's probably um, not a good spot to go squatching. It's beautiful, a lot of wildlife, but I don't think there's any squatch there. And that's just my personal opinion. I think there's some areas not too far from Denali that are prime squatching habitat.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, I think Wrangell, St. Elias, there's a ton of missing people out of there. That's part of the Alaska Triangle.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that Bigfoot are responsible for them, but I mean it's some unforgiving land, and you know if you're going to go in there, it's you're taking your life in your own hands.
I was told by multiple people out of Christachina, which is right off the cutoff highway there, um, that there's a family of Bigfoot or a tribe of Bigfoot or a group of Bigfoot, depends on who's telling you the story, who in lives around the backside of one of the mountains uh, that you can see. And I forgot which one. I forgot what the name is of the mountain, but I could point it out on a map. I don't have a
Yeah,
map in front of me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's supposed to be something back in there, but it's on this north side, kind of more on the north side of Wrangell St. Elias National Park, and there is a road that goes out there. You have to you have to fuel up before you get onto Nebezna Road. Um, so you either have to go like 13 or 14 miles south to Posties, or you have to go 13 or 14 miles north to there's like a little, it's not even a lodge, it's just like a quick quick stop kind of gas station out in the middle of nowhere. Looks a little if you've never seen something like that before, it probably looks a little sketchy horror movie like. um, but you know, I fueled up there, no problem.
yeah,
But there's no gas along the road that goes out there, and if your vehicle can't make a 300-mile journey without fueling, then you might want to take some extra gas.
yeah, yeah. So, folks, come to Alaska and see UFOs and Bigfoot. And I guess this is the best Alaska tourist tourist info. This is where you come for the real deal. Right here is Alaska. You can hear all about the strange things
If
going on in Alaska.
as long as you can, and you can venture out to these places as long as you know where you're going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of personal locator beacons and firearms and bear spray. I rarely go anywhere without all three of those items. So
I
yeah,
don't always have bear spray, but I usually have. I I'm a blade person, so I usually have like a knife and a. I have like this mini machete. It's like a half size machete, uh, and maybe I have a gun on me, maybe I don't. But at least I have some knives, and with my fencing background, I'm always overconfident that I can win.
yeah. We had a pretty good
Maybe
sized
comes
black
it.
bear in the backyard the other day. I just got done eating dinner and I was walking past the window and I'm like, "Hey, there's a bear in the backyard." So my wife came. And we got some pretty decent video footage of it. It's on the Alasquatch Instagram. I think you can see that. But yeah,
It's
it's pretty cool. There's all kinds of wildlife up here, and if you don't see a UFO or a Bigfoot, you'll probably see a moose or bear or something. So yeah, pack your
I,
bags and get on up here.
I think I'm actually more afraid of running into a grizzly bear or a moose when I'm out. So I try not to go alone, and that's been like one of my biggest issues is I'm kind of an introvert person, and I don't always have friends who are around or readily available. And do I want to go out into the woods by myself? We have a lot of we have a lot of bears around here, and we have a lot of moose. Um, funny, we've had wolves come in and like the outskirts of town kind of come in and attack dogs and stuff. But I'm not really scared of the wolves. I'm It's the bears and the moose that scare
Yeah.
me.
Well, I've been trying to go moose hunting for the last 2 years now, and I'm always like, well, I need to find somebody to take me hunting or go hunting with me, and I haven't found like the person I was going to go with this year. He ended up moving away, so I'm my wife's like telling me I can't go by myself. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I gotta find somebody to go out with me that'll take me moose hunting. Yeah. All
Well,
right. Well, let's go ahead.
I was gonna say I know some people in your area, so after all this is over, I'll share with
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's call it good. I think we've pitched Alaska to those interested in UFOs, Bigfoot, and wildlife in general. So anyway, pick up a copy of Saucers of the North: A History of UFOs in Alaskan Airspace. You can pick that up on Amazon. And Jesse, you have any social media or websites or anything that you want to tell people about?
My author website is jessiedesmond.com. I spell my name with an IE, uh, so JESSIE. And I have an author site on Facebook that you can find if you just search my name. It should come up. If you don't find my author site, you'll probably find my personal Facebook site. I'm pretty easy to find online, so you just have to type in my name.
Yeah, I will put links to those in the show notes. So, guys, check it out. It's a great book. It's a very comprehensive history of UFOs in Alaska, and if you're interested in UFOs or Alaska, it's definitely worth your time. Thanks for coming on, Jesse.
Please buy it. Please
Yeah,
buy it.
please
I
buy
want
it.
to. I want to possibly build a house or something. So please buy it. Maybe you'll help me get there.
All right. Thanks for
I don't
coming
know.
on, Jesse.
All right. Thanks. Bye.